Elijah Brooks had been fighting long before he ever stepped into a boxing ring. Growing up in Southside Chicago, life had been a never-ending battle. His mother worked double shifts at the diner, his father had walked out when he was 6, and by the time he was 12, he had already learned the art of survival. The streets didn't offer second chances. The only way to get respect was to take it. But Elijah had something the others didn't: power. Not just in his fists, but in his heart. He fought with a desperation that made him different. Whether it was defending his little brother from schoolyard bullies or sneaking into the local boxing gym to watch the older kids train, he had an instinct for combat. One night, after getting into a fight with a local gang member, he staggered into Gus Ramirez's boxing gym, bloodied but defiant. Gus, a retired trainer with more scars than stories, watched the boy clean himself up in the gym's grimy restroom.
"You fight like a wild dog,"
Gus muttered. Elijah wiped his busted lip with the back of his hand.
"Yeah? What's it to you?"
Gus smirked.
"Dogs get put down. Fighters get trained."
And just like that, Elijah found his way inside the ring. At first, the gym was his escape. The leather-heavy smell of sweat and old punching bags, the rhythmic sound of speed bags rattling, the sharp commands of trainers shouting combinations. It became his sanctuary. But soon, it became more than that. Gus saw something in Elijah: raw power, untamed aggression, but also a hunger that couldn't be taught.
"Boxing ain't just about punching,"
Gus told him one night, wrapping Elijah's hands with cloth.
"It's about patience, control, timing."
Elijah took the lesson to heart, though patience was never his strong suit. By 16, he was knocking out men in underground fights. By 18, he had Golden Gloves titles under his belt. The world outside the ring was still unforgiving, but inside it, he was untouchable. The nickname came after his first professional fight. It was supposed to be a tough match, a test. The guy he was fighting, Andre the Crusher Morales, had never been knocked down before. Elijah ended it in one punch. A right hook so clean, so devastating, that Morales hit the canvas before he even knew what had happened. The commentators were stunned.
"This kid's a juggernaut."
Was born. Fame came fast. Too fast. With each fight, his name grew. He was on magazine covers, talk shows, posters plastered across gyms. Promoters lined up to book him. Reporters called him boxing's next legend. He had the power of Tyson, the speed of Ali, and the confidence of Mayweather. But Elijah didn't care about any of that. The money? Good. The recognition? Nice. But none of it mattered as much as the fight itself. He wasn't fighting for belts or headlines. He was fighting for the boy who grew up with nothing. The boy who was told he'd never be anything. Every fight was personal. Every punch carried the weight of his past. And as he climbed higher, demolishing opponent after opponent, the world started to believe what he already knew: Elijah Brooks was destined to be the best. But destiny had a cruel way of testing its champions. The night of the championship fight was electric. The entire world watched as Elijah Brooks stepped into the ring at Madison Square Garden, his hands wrapped tight, his body carved from years of sweat and sacrifice. The lights were blinding, the roar of the crowd deafening. But all he could hear was the steady thud of his heartbeat in his ears. This was it, the moment he had been chasing his entire life. Across from him stood Marcus the Iron Wall Reed, the reigning champion, a man who had never been knocked out, a fighter with an iron chin, a strategic mind, and the kind of experience that turned legends into cautionary tales. The world saw it as a clash of titans, the unbeaten powerhouse versus the unbreakable warrior. For Elijah, it was more than that. This wasn't just a fight. It was the culmination of everything: the nights of hunger, the battles on the streets, the pain, the sacrifice. This was his moment, his prime. The bell rang, and Elijah stormed forward. He was faster, younger, hungrier. His jabs snapped like gunfire, his footwork smooth, calculated. But Marcus didn't flinch. He absorbed the shots, waiting, testing. When he finally struck, it was like getting hit by a sledgehammer. A left hook slammed into Elijah's ribs, sending a shockwave of pain through his body. Elijah gritted his teeth.
So that's how it is.
Marcus smirked.
You ain't the first young gun to come for my crown, kid.
The fight turned into a war. Every round was a brutal exchange of power, speed, and will. Elijah threw punches that would have dropped any other fighter, but Marcus took them and kept coming. His experience showed. He was patient, waiting for openings, forcing Elijah to burn energy. By the 6th round, Elijah felt it, the exhaustion creeping in, the weight of the fight pressing down on him. He had never fought someone like this before. Gus, now his head trainer, yelled from the corner.
Stick to the game plan. Don't get reckless.
But Elijah's pride wouldn't let him step back. He wasn't here to win on points. He was here to dominate. And that's when Marcus made him pay. Marcus baited him, let him think he had the upper hand. Then, in a flash, he countered, a perfectly timed uppercut that sent Elijah crashing to the canvas. For the first time in his career, he tasted the floor. The crowd gasped. Reporters scrambled. The referee started counting. Elijah's vision blurred. His head pounded. He could hear Gus screaming, but the words were distant, like a radio playing in another room. Was this it? Had he finally met his match? Then, deep inside, something snapped. A fire. A voice.
Get up.
Elijah's hands clenched into fists. His breathing steadied, and at the count of 8 he rose. Marcus expected him to break. But Elijah wasn't built like that. Something changed in him after that knockdown. He fought smarter, using feints, slipping punches, forcing Marcus into deeper waters. The champion, for the first time, looked uncertain. And then came the 12th round. Both men were exhausted, bloodied, running on fumes. The crowd was on its feet, sensing history. Marcus came forward with a right hook, but Elijah saw it this time, dodged it by inches. In that split second, he countered a brutal, picture-perfect right hook to the chin. Marcus stiffened. His eyes rolled back. He crumpled like a statue, crashing onto the mat. The referee counted, but everyone knew Marcus wasn't getting up. Elijah Brooks was the new world champion. The crowd roared. The cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed. But as Elijah stood in the center of the ring, belt in hand, sweat and blood dripping from his face, he felt nothing. He had spent his whole life chasing this moment, conquering every obstacle, proving everyone wrong. So, why did it feel empty? As the announcer declared him the new champion, Elijah forced a smile, raising his fists in victory. But deep down, a thought crept in, one that he tried to ignore. What happens when there's nothing left to chase? The championship belt sat on Elijah Brooks' mantle like a silent judge. It had been 6 months since he won the title, and the world still chanted his name. Talk shows, magazine covers, sponsorship deals, everyone wanted a piece of the juggernaut. But something had changed. The hunger that once burned inside him had dulled. The fire that drove him through countless nights of sweat and sacrifice had been replaced by comfort.
He was the best.
He had proved it. So, why did he feel like he was losing something? The world outside the ring had swallowed him whole. Late-night parties, celebrity entourages, business deals that had nothing to do with boxing. Instead of waking up at dawn to train, he woke up to silk sheets and the scent of expensive liquor stank.
Yo, champ. Another round.
A voice called from across the club one night. Elijah barely heard them. He sat in a VIP booth, staring at his hands. They felt soft, weaker. Gus, his old trainer, saw the change. He watched as Elijah skipped training, let his diet slip, and replaced road work with red carpets.
This ain't you.
Gus warned one evening after Elijah stumbled into the gym, still smelling like last night.
Champions don't get comfortable. You losing your edge.
Elijah smirked, tapping his championship belt.
I'm still the best, old man.
Gus shook his head.
Not for long.
The fight was supposed to be a routine title defense. His opponent, Tyrell, the Flash, Jennings, was young, fast, and hungry, but Elijah was still the reigning king. Or at least that's what he told himself. The bell rang, and from the first exchange, something felt off. Tyrell moved faster than Elijah expected, slipping punches with ease. When Elijah tried to turn up the pressure, his timing was just a fraction too slow, his footwork just a step behind. Then, in the fourth round, it happened. A clean counterpunch. A flash of pain. And then, darkness. When Elijah woke up, he was staring at the arena ceiling. The referee was waving his arms. The fight was over. He had been knocked out. The crowd gasped. The sports world exploded. Headlines the next morning asked the question he had been dreading. Is Elijah Brooks past his prime? The loss shook him, but he told himself it was a fluke. He trained harder, promising to silence the critics. But the second loss came even faster. And this time it wasn't even close. Jamal the Bulldozer Kane didn't just beat Elijah, he embarrassed him. Ragdolled him around the ring. Exposed every weakness. The referee had to step in before Elijah hit the mat again. This time, the headlines weren't just questioning his prime. They were declaring it over. The juggernaut falls. Once great, now just a name. Did success ruin Elijah Brooks? His sponsors pulled out. The endorsement deals dried up. The people who once flooded his phone with invitations stopped calling. And Gus didn't even bother telling him I told you so. Because by then, Elijah already knew. One night, he sat alone in his penthouse, championship belt in his lap. He traced the gold plating with his fingers, remembering what it felt like to fight for something.
To really fight.
He looked in the mirror. The man staring back at him wasn't the same kid who had clawed his way out of the streets. That kid had fire. That kid had something to prove. This man had nothing left. For the first time in his life, Elijah Brooks asked himself a question he never thought he'd have to face. Was his prime already behind him? And for the first time, he didn't know the answer. The silence was the worst part. Elijah Brooks had once lived in the roar of crowds, the deafening chants of his name, the flash of cameras capturing his every move. Now he woke up to nothing. No reporters at his doorstep. No team waiting for him at the gym. No calls from promoters looking to book their next big event. Just silence. The world had moved on. It didn't take long for the Boxing Commission to strip him of his title. After back-to-back losses, the sport no longer saw him as a champion, just another cautionary tale. The belt that once defined him now belonged to someone else. He told himself he didn't care. Told himself he could get it back. But deep down, he knew the truth. The him that won that belt didn't exist anymore. Determined to reclaim his legacy, Elijah did what he always did. He fought. He trained harder than he had in years, pushing his body past its limits. Early morning runs, brutal sparring sessions, endless drills. But no matter how much he pushed, something was missing. His legs weren't as quick. His reactions weren't as sharp. His punches, once devastating, no longer carried the same snap. In the gym, the younger fighters who once looked at him with awe now watched with quiet pity. They could see it. So could Gus. One afternoon, after another grueling session, Gus stood in the corner, arms crossed.
It's time to let it go, kid.
Elijah glared at him.
I'm not done.
Gus sighed.
You already are.
The word stung. More than any punch he had ever taken. But what hurt worse?
He knew Gus was right.
He took one last fight anyway. He had to. Not for the money. Not even for the title. For himself. But the moment he stepped into the ring, he knew this wasn't his world anymore. The man standing across from him was everything Elijah used to be. Hungry, young, ruthless. The bell rang. Elijah fought with everything he had. Every ounce of will. Every piece of himself. He refused to go down without a war. But his body betrayed him. His timing was just a half-second off. His punches didn't land with the same force. He saw the openings, but his body wouldn't react fast enough to take them. And then, a brutal left hook. Elijah hit the canvas. He heard the referee's voice, the crowd's muffled screams, the lights above him blurring. He tried to rise, pushed with everything he had, but his body wouldn't listen. And then he heard it.
10.
It was over. He left the arena through the back entrance, avoiding the cameras. There were no reporters waiting for him. No fans begging for autographs. Just the cold night air and the sound of his footsteps echoing in the empty alley. He walked home alone. When he reached his apartment, he sat in the dark, staring at his championship belt. The same belt that once meant everything. Now it was just a reminder of who he used to be. His prime wasn't slipping away. It was gone. And for the first time in his life, Elijah Brooks had no idea who he was without it. Elijah Brooks had lost everything. His title, his respect, his place in the sport that once defined him. For months, he drifted through life like a ghost, wandering the streets of Chicago, past the same gyms where he once trained, past the posters of younger fighters plastered on billboards where his face used to be.
He drank. A lot.
Spent nights in bars where no one recognized him, drowning in liquor, trying to forget that the man in the mirror wasn't the same one who once stood at the top of the world. But forgetting never worked. Because every morning, the sun still rose. And every morning, the weight of his empty hands, his missing gloves, his missing purpose, reminded him that he had no idea what came next. One night, he got into a fight outside a bar. It wasn't like the old days. It wasn't controlled, disciplined, inside the ropes with a referee. It was ugly. Some drunk guy had recognized him, laughing.
You used to be the champ, right?
Elijah ignored him, but the guy kept talking.
Man, you look like shit.
And something inside Elijah snapped. The punches came fast, too fast for the guy to react. But for Elijah, it wasn't about winning. It was about proving, to himself, to the world, to anyone, that he still had something left. He didn't stop until he felt hands grabbing him, dragging him away. The guy lay on the ground, his face a mess, bystanders shouting. Then, sirens. He sat in a holding cell, head in his hands, his knuckles swollen and bloodied. Footsteps approached.
Elijah Brooks.
He looked up. Gus stood outside the bars, arms crossed, eyes full of disappointment. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Gus shook his head.
You really think this is how your story ends?
Elijah scoffed.
It already ended.
No.
Gus said, his voice firm.
You just don't know how to start the next chapter.
Gus bailed him out, but there were no lectures. No speeches. Just one sentence before he walked away.
If you ever decide to stop feeling sorry for yourself, meet me at the gym.
At first, Elijah ignored it. But the words stuck with him. They haunted him. A week passed. Then another. And then one morning, Elijah found himself standing outside Ramirez's boxing gym again, the same place where it all began. He hesitated at the door. Inside, he heard the familiar sounds, the rhythmic pounding of fists against heavy bags, the sharp commands of trainers, the grunts of young fighters pushing themselves past their limits. The hunger in the air was unmistakable. He had once felt that hunger. He had been that hunger. He stepped inside. Gus saw him and nodded, but said nothing. Just tossed him a pair of hand wraps.
Elijah Brooks back in the gym?
One of the younger fighters whispered.
What's he doing here?
Another scoffed.
Washed up. He ain't coming back.
Elijah heard them. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't care. Because this time, he wasn't fighting for them. Not for the headlines. Not for the fame. He was fighting for himself. The punches felt different as he hit the bag, more controlled, less desperate. His body was older, but his mind was sharper. The lessons from his prime were still there, buried under the years of excess and regret. And as he trained, something new took root inside him. A different kind of hunger. Not to reclaim his title. Not to prove the world wrong. But to build something that would last beyond himself. Months passed, and the whispers faded. The younger fighters started watching him, not with pity, but with respect. One night, A kid named Jalen stepped forward. 17, raw, full of fire.
Coach,
He said, looking at Elijah nervously.
can you show me how to throw that right hook?
Elijah hesitated.
Coach.
The word felt strange, foreign. But as he stepped forward, adjusting Jalen's stance, guiding his movement, something inside him settled. Maybe his prime was gone. But maybe, just maybe, his greatest fight had yet to begin. Because this time, it wasn't about him. It was about passing the fire to the next generation. And for the first time in a long time, Elijah Brooks felt at peace.